But we already know that our healthcare system, we are human beings. It's run by human beings. I mean, to err is human.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that we try to work on every day, is to reduce those errors, improve our quality. And we have a lot of efforts ongoing, both around the globe, nationally, locally, and then even in our facilities that speak to that. But again, I would never tell a patient to just blindly rely on the healthcare system.
Today I'm joined by Dr. Martha Beach. You are a doctorate level prepared nurse practitioner. You specialize in neurocritical care and trauma. Is that correct?
Yes, and now surgery.
And now surgery. So you scrub in too.
Yes.
All right. And then also, when I was just kind of looking over your resume and stuff online, you have a ton of certifications. Too many probably to mention. But the ones that I kind of want to focus on and talk about is you are a legal nurse consultant and a kind of hand-in-hand life care planner.
That's right.
You kind of run those businesses as one. They kind of overlap.
That's right.
Okay. And then also something else that I want to talk about maybe in the second half of the interview is something that you're very passionate about, which is ALS. You have it's a foundation, like a 501c3 that's called ALS International.
Yes, it's a charity, ALS International Foundation.
Right, and I know that's very personal to you, so I'll let you get into that at in the second half, and you can tell the whole story about how you got into that.
Wonderful.
Okay. So I guess if you can start just with explaining what is a legal nurse consultant, because I think people in the medical field may have heard of it before, but outside of the medical field, I don't know if it's a well-known thing. So maybe just start with what is a legal nurse consultant, what do you do in that role, and how did you get into it? Because you have been in it for almost 20 years, right?
Correct.
Over 20 years?
Correct.
So maybe just give an explanation of what it is and how you got into it.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for inviting me here today. So two of the certifications that I hold are related to what's called life care planning, and then as a legal nurse consultant, and they kind of overlap. And so how I got into this, I started out as a life care planner to begin with, but to answer your first question about what is a legal nurse consultant, nurses that have at least 5 years of expertise in an area can put themselves out there to review records, testify to the standards of care. They can be used in all kind of areas, law firms, hospitals. They can work independently on their own. But primarily what we're looking at are taking our expertise, reviewing medical records, reviewing the facts of a case, and putting ourselves out there either to give an opinion on the standard of care. Did we meet the standard of care? Was there a change or deviation in the standard of care? And also we can speak to that as an expert. So we can do expert testimony and witness. So that would be to be deposed or to do trial expert testimony as well. So we're taking our expertise, but then we take it even further. There's a series of classes that you take to pass to become a licensed or a certified legal nurse consultant. There is no licensure for legal nurse consultants. It's a certification. And then for the life care planning, I've also been doing that. That's actually and this goes into your next question, how I got started in doing this type of work. And so life care planning is a document, basically, a dynamic document. It takes catastrophic illnesses, injuries, and now we can really apply it to not just any injury or illness that affects the lifespan. And then we can take our knowledge as nurses, evaluate someone, look at what the cost it would be, which is very interesting today. And we'll talk a little bit more about the future of healthcare and the current state of healthcare and why these specialties are in demand and how you can get into them. But for life care planning, I had special training in this area where I would take a person who'd been catastrophically injured. So that could be a brain injury primarily or a spinal cord injury, but something that is catastrophic and a permanent injury that affects the person for the rest of their life. And then you take that information, grab any interviewing, you can go to the home, medical records, any depositions, evaluations by medical professionals, rehabilitation specialists. You take that information and then you put it into a very well organized, which nurses are very good at looking at body systems, but we take that information, we organize it, and then we project out into the future. We take current cost and then we project out over the lifespan of a person what the cost and what those needs are to keep a person, to maintain their health and to mitigate or to avoid complications in the future. So that area of life care planning, I started in the 90s. And from there, as I developed expertise in nursing, I was asked to speak on standards of care, review records, and through that process, I then formally started to take courses as well to learn about the legal field. So as nurses, it's very important if you want to be a legal nurse consultant and you want to maintain or achieve certification, there's going to be a certain amount of knowledge that you need to understand and be able to apply to your practice within the legal field. And that's essentially what allows you to separate yourself as a legal nurse consultant, that you do have that legal background as well and how it applies. And so I started speaking on standard of cares in nursing, deviations or upholding the standard of care and defending nurses, as well as if there was a misstep by a nurse in their care.
So the life care plan, are you like submitting that to an insurance company so that someone can get, like the person who's affected can get that money? Like let's say they're, something happens when they're like 20 years old and they're going to need 50 years or 60 years of care. You would submit, this is how much it's going to cost to take care of this patient for the rest of their life.
That's right.
And then you're submitting that to like an insurance company that's going to like do the payout?
Yes.
Yeah.
It potentially, my client could be an insurance company, a defense attorneys and adjusters at an insurance company may want to know. There may be a claim, and they want to know, as well as it could be a plaintiff representing them on the other side. So they feel like they've been wronged, and there's been an established cause. So there may be malpractice or liability, and so I may be hired for either side. But yes, I would submit a report, and that report is considered a legal document based on the methodology of doing life care plan. But yes, it projects into the future what this person needs. And we can also do them for people. Personally, I've written life care plans for families as well to be used to help establish their estate and to know how much money to set aside for their family member.
Now, is that difficult? Because I imagine there may be someone on the other side that's doing what you're doing, that's fighting for the other side, and they're fighting for either no, they don't need that much money, or they need more money, depending on which side you're on. So do you run into like pushback on whatever your recommendations are, or is that kind of like what the lawyers handle? You just kind of make your recommendations and then they will handle the rest
That's
of it.
right. To be objective, as life care planners, we should be objective. But yes, that definitely comes down to a point of argument and examination of our methodology and how we arrived at those figures. So that does happen at times.
But you just have everything like written out. These are my findings. This is what my estimated cost is going to be to take care of this person.
Yes, that's right. And it's based on a methodology that we're trained to do within our industry.
So the legal nurse consultant side, what do you do? Is it like a 50-50 split, like you're helping the attorneys of those who have been injured, or are you working for like healthcare systems? Have you been consulted by healthcare systems before, or who are your clients?
Yes, a great question. So I've been very fortunate, and I think this comes down to some advice that I've given where I've mentored legal nurse consultants or nurses wanting to get into the field to do this kind of work, that it's very important to remain objective. You can feel the pressure at times. I think any expert witness, regardless of what area of expertise that you have. It could be in construction. But when you're hired by your client, it's very important to maintain your objectivity. So back to your question, yes, I can be hired by either side, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So plaintiff typically has a cause of action that they filed. And so they are trying to prove their point that they've been injured and wronged, or it could be from the other direction, and I do a lot of work, and it's about 50-50. I think right now I'm about maybe 60-40 for defense, and that would be for hospital systems. It could be for an insurance company that defends the hospital system, and they'll ask me to look at the case to see, and it could be a life care plan, but we're talking about legal nurse consulting. Mm-hmm. Essentially, I'm looking at, was the standard of care breached? Did we do something wrong? And my client and I what do we do now? Mm-hmm. How do we defend? And so I spend a lot of time defending nurses and their actions.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a fear of every healthcare worker is, because I mean, like, I even think about getting called in on something that happened a year ago or two. I mean, that's something, I don't remember what happened last week, like a patient will come back like a month later and they say, hey, you took care of me. And I'm like, I don't remember you.
Right.
And I think it's just can be kind of scary to think about. You can be called back a year later or 2 years later. And I mean, I guess it's all up to what you documented. Mm-hmm. I mean, by that point, you can't really remember, unless it was something that really bad that happened. Yes. You might remember. But I think that is a fear of a lot of healthcare workers, that they have to go to court or even be questioned by the own internal, healthcare review board or whatever. Do you see a lot of cases that go to court? Because I've heard that a lot of times they will get up to the point of going to court and then one of the sides will settle. Like they don't want to go through the process of going through court. And so like something like 90% of the cases just end up getting settled or paid out or something before they go to court.
You're right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. That's true. So the majority, I would say, over the last 25 years of my work, I would say 97%, 95 to 97, if I had to take a guess, even maybe higher, settle. I've had cases settle on the courthouse steps. I've flown to a case before thinking that I was going to testify in trial, and I was told as I was landing the case had settled, so they can even settle in the middle of trial. So yes.
Is that just like a game they play? Is it or like they're trying to call each other's bluffs, or what do you think that is? Like they're trying to, I don't know. It's like they're almost trying to call each other's bluff of, are you really going to go through to court with this? Is there some of that, or did they just realize at the last minute, like, yeah, we're probably not going to win this one? Or
I'm not quite sure what goes into the legal strategy to get to that stage, but I do know that typically cases do settle prior to going to court. And the sense that I get over the years is that the legal system, the justice system, really does want us to work out our issues when we bring a claim, work them out before they get to the process of a trial. And so that's what the justice system is set up to do, is to offer that at any given point. So I've had cases settle right after my interviews for a deposition within minutes of heading to the airport. So they can settle at any given moment. And that's something good for a life care planner or a legal nurse consultant, anyone doing expert witness work, especially in healthcare, but any expert witness to keep up with your cases, because you'll find that they're at all stages. So that's where I feel like nurses can really use their organization skills as well to keep up with their cases.
Have you had to testify in court?
Yes, I have.
What is that like? I'm sure it's scary. Like they're looking at you like you are the expert.
Yes.
What is that? Because I mean, I'm assuming that when attorneys can be intimidating. Even though you're the expert in your field, I'm sure that they can be very intimidating. What is that? What is that like?
Yes. An interesting story. My very first nurse expert case that I reviewed, and I was told, "Oh, these cases settle. Don't worry about it," because I said I've never testified in a nursing standard of care case to date. Don't worry, it'll settle. Well, mine didn't settle. So
Do you remember what it was on?
I do. I do.
Can you share? Or, I mean, was it like just nothing specific, but like, was it I don't know, like a fall or something in the hospital, or?
It was a hospital case.
Hospital, okay.
It was a hospital case. I was the plaintiff expert, and this patient, I do remember the case, and I remember it very well. And so back to what we were talking about earlier, I enjoyed hearing what you had to say about that's a fear. I think of all of ours. I'm clinically active, and I know you're clinically active, but it is something that you keep in mind because we are educated to make sure that our documentation is timely and thorough and accurate. And so that's not just for clinical quality of care and continuity to make sure that the patients are taken care of appropriately, but that's also for, as you were saying, we want to be able to go back and look at our record if we have, for any reason, if we're looking at trends in hospital length of stay, we want to be able to look back at our documentation or have someone, God forbid, if we were not around any longer, someone could pick up and see what we did and clearly understand it. So that's part of the nursing documentation process that we're taught. So back to my case and testifying. So this case in particular, it was a plaintiff case. They made a claim. This person was catastrophically injured in the hospital and injured for life. And that's essentially what a catastrophic injury is a disability, a catastrophic disability that the person will have for the rest of their life. And the claim was being made that it was as the result of negligence and malpractice within the hospital by providers. And some of those providers were nurses. And that we were claiming. And again, I was the plaintiff expert. And in my medical review of the chart, in reading depositions, which is also expert testimony at that time prior to trial, so a deposition, what it's under oath. But in gathering that information, I came to the decision of the medical opinion as a nurse that the standard of care had been breached. And that case did not settle. It was a catastrophic case, and it did go to court, and we prevailed. And out of that, after I testified, it was a very interesting experience. I walked, and back to your question, how it feels, it can be intimidating. Yes and no. I think I'm critically care trained, and I've worked in the operating room, and I'm an acute care nurse practitioner. And I think all of us as nurses that work in the acute care setting, at some point, we have experiences of life and death and involved in that. And so I think that trains us well to be able to, if we have the opinion after doing our due diligence and we've reviewed all of the evidence, it becomes not, I wouldn't say easy to testify because it's not easy to testify, but the facts make it easier to hold to your opinions under scrutiny, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And but yes, being on the witness stand in front of a large audience in such a formal way, under oath and sworn under oath, the process itself and the gravity of what you're doing becomes very real at that time. And we prevailed, and as I left that case, I was actually approached outside the courthouse with business cards from other attorneys and other people in the medical field. And I actually got work from that testimony.
Wow. Yeah.
And but we prevailed on that case.
Yeah, and it's live too. Like there's no.
That's right.
There's no do-overs.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, you're. I don't know if it like helped at all to kind of not think about yourself. Like I'm fighting for this someone else on their behalf, kind of. So kind of take like yourself out of it and think, I'm really trying to be an advocate for someone else. That can be helpful, even like in the hospital when you're working.
That's right.
Like sometimes you can, like even when you need to talk to a physician or something, it can be. Especially when you're new, it can be a little.
Yes.
You can be a little nervous, but if you kind of take yourself out of the situation think like, no, this isn't about me. I'm actually advocating for someone else. It can kind of give you a little bit of motivation and confidence to take that step.
That's beautifully said and well articulated, because you're absolutely right. And that's why I say a lot of times nurses are in an enviable position. They're well trained and well suited for this type of work because of what you're just describing. We work under that pressure every day, and even the communication styles that we're taught to quickly be able to contact someone, especially up the chain of command. And we talk to them that they want information fast. It needs to be specific. We need to have a plan as to what we think the problem is and what the resolution needs to be. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same process that we use when we're testifying as well to get our point across. And you mentioned advocacy, as long as it is objective. And it is, I don't think about myself when I'm testifying. I'm really focused on the facts of the case. And back to the intimidation, the cross-examination from the other side, and if you're prepared appropriately, so if your client has prepared you for the facts of the case, they're going to want their expert witness to know everything, no surprises, mm-hmm. and that we're ready for mm-hmm. that when it comes.
Do you see, I know there's a lot of nurses who, I don't know, there's this debate of should nurses get insurance, like malpractice insurance? Mm-hmm. Did you deal with a lot of nurses? I don't know if you even were made aware of if they had insurance or not, but I know some people carry that, but then I've also heard that there's protection within, like if you work at a hospital, there's some kind of protection over their employees. Are you familiar with any of that?
I am, and you're right. There is. If you are an employee of not just a hospital, but of a practice, and these are questions that we as nurses should be asking ourselves as well. That's why I love doing what I do and keeping a balance. I love staying clinically active because it helps my legal work to stay clinically active, mm-hmm. To stay up on the evidence-based medicine and how it's applied. And I know on a day-to-day basis how that's playing itself out in my setting that I can say that I'm an expert in. But the opposite also goes for as well. It's important for us to be able to ask those questions. I was going to actually mention it's important when you're a legal nurse consultant or you're doing any expert witness work as a nurse, whether it's a life care planner or the standard of care, or you could be prepping. I mean, there's many things we can do with our expertise to help a client, but it's important that we communicate to our client how to prep us, what we expect, what kind of records we need, what kind of time frame we need to prep before a deposition. So we have to have, again, those crucial conversations that we may have at the bedside with a physician or a therapist or a family member that's upset. That ability to negotiate and navigate the legal system, to educate our clients in the legal world, to set ourselves up. So back to insurance, yes, and it's important that we ask those when we take jobs, how am I covered legally? Mm-hmm. And they should be able to explain that to you. But yes, facilities typically have, either they insure themselves, so it's called self-insured, or they may have regular insurance directly with an insurance company, or it could be what's called a TPA or a third-party administrator. And then as far as the question on whether or not we should have our own, I think it's an individual decision. But I do think it's important to have your own insurance as well.
Yeah. Is there just some general advice that you'd give to, because, in one of these cases, I imagine that you could have everyone being called in from, a CNA who had contact with the patient to nurses, physicians, all the way up to administration. Like there could have been something that they did that was an oversight. So what are some just general, principles that can apply to, from the CNA to nurse, doctor, all the way up to administration about providing good care and keeping themselves out of the courtroom where they don't want to be?
That is a wonderful question, and I think it's something we all should wake up and take with us every day. As a practitioner, anyone who's touching another human, and providing care to them. All of us, but in particular, since we're talking about, and we're both nurses, and in the nursing field, I think it's very important that we remember that we are taking care of people, and this could be ourselves or our loved one as well. And the advice that I would give is, in terms, keep that in mind, keep your documentation in mind, how you're documenting in a timely way, an accurate way, your information, whether it's verbal or it's written or it's uploaded into the electronic health record. That information is critical, that and to be transparent. If you see something that you're concerned about, don't let it go. Elevate it up the chain of command. Go to your charge nurse. Make sure the charge nurse is going up to the manager. Make sure the manager is going up, whatever your chain of command is in your hospital. And that goes for the novice nurse as well as the seasoned nurse. And that goes all the way through administration. Administrators that walk around and do spot checks, tracers within a hospital for quality and safety issues, and anything that could pose a risk that you're trying to manage. Anything that we see, as nurses, we're very well prepared to see those things. Don't ignore them. And I think that is, I've seen trends at times when I've reviewed a chart, and where you see the problem evolving over the days, where multiple nurses touched that patient and documented and continued to let something, for lack of a better term, fester. Mm-hmm. And whether they were speaking up or not, it didn't come across in the documentation.
Mm-hmm. I know you know what, like, copying forward is on the electronic? I know that drives some people crazy, because there's so much documentation that it is a good tool to be able to copy forward if you go back and look at it. Because I know it happens, people copy forward and the documentation's done, but they really don't know what they documented. Have you seen problems with that? People just
yes.
copying forward and not. I mean, it does make things go faster, but you have to go back and look at it.
Yes.
Because you could be copying forward something that just is not true anymore. There could have been a change in condition or something. So I know managers hate it. I know, like, administration and managers, they hate it. The nurses like it because it saves time. But there's a trade-off. You do have to go back and look at the charting.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy you brought that up. If I had to pick one, no. And again, we all do what we do the way we need to do it, as long as we get our work done and as long as it's within the standards. And so, without taking away the ability to critically think and to use your style as a nurse and how you're going to document your care, ultimately the purpose of documentation is to communicate that information to all the parties involved that are taking care of that patient. And if you're allowing a certain practice, like documenting forward or letting the computer, the electronic health record, default to the previous assessment, and you're just changing anything, as you said, if there's a change in condition, it's very easy to make a mistake and overlook that because of all of the technology and all of the requirements expected on nurses to document. But they have to make sure whatever is copied forward or defaults from the previous assessment is accurate. Mm-hmm. And it is changed if there's a change in condition. And yes, that I see that all the time.
Mm-hmm. What are the things that you see, why things go wrong in healthcare, or like a hospital or a doctor's office? Is it, and by that I mean, like, you could be short-staffed one day, and maybe that caused a problem, or people, you're supposed to have 4 patients, but I don't know, someone called in sick, so everyone has 6 patients. Is there a common denominator of things that you run into often, of why things are getting overlooked or why mistakes happen?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've seen a big shift since the electronic health record in particular, but back to trends that I see, and I don't think it's unique to my cases that I review. I would think that most expert witnesses in the nursing field or the medical field would agree to this, but what I see is the lack of nurses speaking up, and when changes of condition occur, and just allowing it to continue, and documenting the same assessment. And I wanted to talk about that for a minute. In doing so, when you're reviewing a chart as an expert witness, and it could be myself or it could be a medical doctor, it could be a respiratory therapist, but there's other professions seeing that patient as well and screening them and evaluating them, and they're doing their progress notes and documenting as well. And that's where you see the changes, when 2 or 3 other providers came in behind the nurses that are taking care of that patient, and they're documenting something completely different from the nurses. And their documentation is not changing for 2 or 3 days, but the others that are coming in are seeing something quite different.
So there's big discrepancies
Yes,
amongst the...
it could be subtle or
Yeah.
big discrepancies, but yes. And I would say the biggest downfall is staffing. It is staffing. I've seen, and I can pick up very quickly, where, especially if nurses are documenting and putting late entries in, where they've been working all night or all day, and then they try to download a bunch of information toward the end of their shifts. I don't know if they're writing on scrap paper.
So you look at the times
Yes.
that, like they're charting at, let's say they work like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and they're charting at 8 p.m., but they're like back timing it to earlier in the day.
Yes.
Which sometimes happens.
Yes.
Sometimes that happens, but you're able to look at all that and see, why is this person charting, or
Yes.
and did that lead to a bad outcome?
That's right. That's right. And it could be that the nurse had their hands full. The patient was really needing a lot of hands-on care, and so of course that's your priority. And so yes, back to, we do understand about late entries. There's nothing wrong with the late entry at all. But if you see that it's a trend through a shift or two, and or it's not timely, so they're putting documentation in for, let's say every 4 hours, they're to be documenting a certain set of vital signs, or a certain their unit has a policy, or they've got an order in the chart to evaluate this patient. And again, you don't just have to evaluate the patient per the orders of every 4 hours. You just can't deviate from the orders. You can evaluate a patient anytime clinically you think it's necessary. So you can evaluate them every 15 minutes if you notice a change in condition. So you can't over-nurse the patient for assessments. But the nurses have to remember, you're calling a doctor or a nurse practitioner or another nurse and saying, hey, Mr. So-and-so in room so-and-so that I'm taking care of is in here for this issue, and this is what's going on. Well, with the advent of the electronic health record, they have the ability to pull that record up wherever they are as well in real time. So if they're at home going into the medical record, if they're 2 floors up going into the medical record and they're wanting to look at vital signs, lab work, your notes, if that's not up to date fairly accurately in a timely manner, they're missing information. So from their clinical judgment, now you've created a problem.
And I know that, funny story, it was happened to one of my coworkers. They, we would have like these like shift summaries that you would it would kind of expedite handoff report, so that you wouldn't have to give like a full report at the end of your shift. They could like read about what happened, and then you would give them updates as to what happened. But I know that it's generally something only the nurses look at, but I know that sometimes there was a physician who came to the floor and was talking about, something they had read in one of those shift summaries that generally only the nurses look at. And I was just surprised. I was like, wow, he's actually looking at all of the documentation, like even the nurses' notes that, we would assume that only we look at. He was going in and reading them, and not like confronted a nurse, but just like kind of like, hey, why did you put that? That was, he thought something different had happened. So I can't remember the exact scenario, but I remember he did read it and he kind of confronted the nurse about it. So I know that other physicians and respiratory or whoever, they do look at the documentation some more thoroughly than others.
Absolutely, and that becomes apparent if something is alleged that went wrong in a case. So this kind of comes full circle to advice to nurses and why I enjoy doing expert witness work, because it keeps me sharp on both ends, both clinically, that ability to see my care given from someone else's eyes, from another person's scrutiny, and looking at how to tell what I've done with that patient. And so that's a really interesting perspective. And then I would say to creating extra documentation, that there's communication going on kind of on the side. I would be curious if that becomes part of the medical record or that gets tossed. I've seen where things like that get shredded, and it's not part of the medical record. So if it's substituting for the medical record, that's also an issue as well. And so being able to, back to the question from the CNA all the way up to the administration and the executive leadership of a facility or a hospital, those are the things that you want to keep in mind, that we are all communicating. That documentation, that accurate, timely documentation is critical, can be critical. And so the trend that I see when I do see a deviation from the standard of care is staffing and the inability to accurately and timely document information, or leaning on documenting forward or defaulting from the previous assessment. And that's where, and people are relying on that information, and that's how things kind of percolate, for lack of a better word. And there's the problems, and then they start, and you can kind of start seeing,
So because you have been on the side of, advocating for patients, with attorneys, and, maybe they've had bad outcomes and that's why you're on the case, what is some things that you would advise to patients or family members about what can they do to advocate for themselves? I think just myself is like having a family member in the room. I know that's sometimes not possible all the time, but I think that just having someone in the room with their family kind of changes everything. And it can be just as simple as, if there's someone there all the time, they're going to be there when the doctor rounds, and they're going to be there when the nurses come in to take care of them. But is there anything that you would say that, I don't know, could have been avoided? Things that you saw that could have been avoided if the patient advocated for themselves? And I hate to put that responsibility on the patient, because when they come to the hospital or wherever, they should be taken care of. But the fact is that there are accidents, there are things that just go wrong.
That's right.
What can a patient family member do to kind of look out for themselves?
I love the question, and it's a passion of mine, and I'm already thinking about the next half of the segment. So to advocate for yourself, I think it's imperative that as a consumer of healthcare services, whether it's in the hospital or what environment you're in, it could be in the home health, in your home, it's important that the patient understands, and that we understand, they are a team member. This is about them, how they heal. And at the same time, they're vulnerable. They're relying on us. They're in a vulnerable position because of their health and needing us. And so we can't forget about the patient. They're at the centerpiece. So back to the advice that I would give patients, if they're able to advocate for themselves, to speak up and take notes, have a little notebook and a pen, ask people their names when they come in. How do I get in touch with you? Have questions when they round and when they come in. Be prepared for your doctor's appointments. Be prepared for a therapist to come to your home. Be prepared. Be part of your care. And then if you're unable to do that, or family sees that person's unable to do that, absolutely, if you can, be a part, create a team, create a plan, be there with them. And so it's important because they're vulnerable. They're relying on them. or they're relying on, when I say them, they're relying on the healthcare system. But we already know that our healthcare system, we are human beings. It's run by human beings. I mean, to err is human. And that's one of the things that we try to work on every day, is to reduce those errors, improve our quality. And we have a lot of efforts ongoing, both around the globe, nationally, locally, and then even in our facilities that speak to that. But again, I would never tell a patient to just blindly rely on the healthcare system.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's an expectation. They should expect the healthcare system to take care of them. There is that expectation, but I don't know where it falls in the statistics, but there is a high rate of medical errors and deaths that are caused by the healthcare system. I mean, that's just we are human, and things sometimes happen that shouldn't happen. So I like your idea of be prepared and writing questions down for when the provider comes in, because that can, I know a lot of times a doctor comes in and, there's some that are really good about taking the time to explain, and there's others who are in and out. And then it seems like as soon as they leave, the patient has a question. Oh, I forgot to ask them this. So I think that writing stuff down and being prepared is a good piece of advice.
Yes.
So I think maybe this is a good way to segment into your other part of your career that you do, or what you do outside of your professional life, and that's you are an advocate for ALS patients, which is very personal to you. You run, it's called ALS International, right?
That's right.
And that's a 501c3. It's a charitable organization. How did you get involved with that, and what are some of the things that you're doing with ALS International?
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yes, and I'm just in talking about being an expert witness and a nurse. It's amazing how all the synergy occurred. But in 2019, my family member, my husband, was diagnosed with ALS, or what's known commonly as Lou Gehrig's disease, or motor neuron disease if you're outside the United States. And the strange irony is my grandfather also was diagnosed with ALS, unrelated to my husband, my maternal grandfather. And he was diagnosed at the same age as my husband at 52.
It's such a I mean, it's like when you think about cancer, it's like sometimes people just get cancer, and it's like always, it's just like, I think everyone, in the back of their mind, they know that can happen. And it's like ALS is kind of, you just never know. And it seems like it can just affect anyone, it's just scary to think about.
Yes.
So how did you, just talking about your husband, what were some of the, was there the early signs and symptoms, or how was he first diagnosed?
So, yes, there were signs. And what's interesting is I probably had him somewhat diagnosed before we got the diagnosis, because that was my background. That's been my training, is neurological or neurocritical care. And I had noticed he was complaining about difficulty buttoning his shirts, tying his ties before we would go to Mass. His writing, he had lost the interest in writing because it had become a little bit shaky and difficult. Mm-hmm. He noticed that his grip was weaker when he would try to use a tool. And then I noticed when we were exercising, I would notice when he would walk or run fast, his gait seemed to be somewhat, I'm not going to say, it was just uncoordinated. Mm-hmm. And I've known him for so long, I just thought those were just some strange...
Just not normal.
Right.
Yeah. Neurologically,
I just thought they were strange. My mind definitely did not go immediately to anything terminal or of that nature. Mm-hmm. I dismissed it as aging and carpal tunnel, mm-hmm. And whatnot. And that went on for probably a year and a half. And then he took one or two falls. And he's an athlete, or was an athlete. He had been an athlete his entire life, probably the strongest man I've ever known. the strongest man I've ever known. And so then the falls, the tripping and falling, started to raise a red flag. And I thought, well, we need to go and get a wellness exam. But we didn't make it. He had fallen and hit his head. And we ended up at the emergency department. And from that point, he was willing to go get a checkup. And that started the process. And so ALS is diagnosed through a process of elimination. We don't have a test for ALS. And the unfortunate piece to all of this, and you may or may not want to hear it, but because I'm an advocate and I feel very comfortable with my education now and experience with ALS to speak to this, but the research is showing that it's on the rise. And by the year 2040, we are expecting worldwide ALS to have increased by 69%. So that's almost a 70% increase throughout the population. I get calls every day from family, friends that know someone who is going through the process of being worked up for ALS, or they've been diagnosed with ALS, and it's incredible, the number of people. And even the ALS clinics that I've been associated with, I've questioned them as well over the years with my husband using their services, because I've noticed an uptick in just their availability to, it gets harder and harder to get an appointment or to get in, and the response back is, oh, we've had an incredible number of referrals. And I'll ask, what do you think that's due? I don't know.
So is this something like worldwide or in the United States or certain regions of the United States, or is there like any common, they just kind of, they just really don't know. They haven't narrowed it down to any kind of common denominator.
Well, it's worldwide is the projection at 69% by the year 2040 of the increase. There are triggers that they are narrowing down. The fortunate thing over the last year or two, which is really exciting, is that we're getting artificial intelligence involved into all avenues of looking and investigating ALS, the root causes of ALS, and we know that environment plays a part. We know there's toxins, certain toxins. We know that there's certain areas and demographics that seem to be affected more than others. And so they are looking into that. But I'll always put a plug in for ALS that some people tend to focus on a cure as opposed to care. And my goal is to educate the public that I'm not looking for a cure. It would be nice to cure all these different diseases, but I'm not looking for a cure, and I don't think many people with ALS are looking to cure ALS. Now, some of the charities will push curing, some of the research pushes curing, and for obvious reasons. But from a caregiver perspective, from a provider perspective, I can tell you, and an advocate, I can tell you, we just want care. We want to slow down the process. We want to treat the symptoms. We want to address what we know is affecting the motor neurons. And there's been a paradigm shift over the last 3 or 4 years to focusing on just that, because we're not, even though we would like to cure diabetes and heart disease, we're certainly not eliminating them. And I don't see that coming down the pipeline anytime soon, but we are caring for them. We are doing better identifying early on those at risk and what risk we can modify. And I see that that's how ALS and neurological diseases will be treated. And I think that comes from people like me. And my husband and I felt, because we saw these gaps and opportunities, we wanted to create a charity to address and advocate for that. So in 2022, we created the ALS International Foundation, and there's multiple ALS charities, and a lot of them are run by some wonderful people. And I would say the majority of them that I tend to gravitate toward are those that have been inspired and are currently being run by families or the person themselves that have ALS.
So what is your foundation? What's their goal? Like, what's their mission? Is it education? Or like you said, you're not really, you're more focused on care. So is it just getting people resources and education, or what's like the mission and goal of the foundation?
Yes, that's exactly right. So we've noticed the opportunity or the gap in a lot of the care out there has been to the actual caregivers and the person with ALS. And people with ALS are called PALS, PALS. And then CALS, C, is the caregiver for ALS. So people refer to them to separate them as PALS and CALS. And so we just noticed that a lot of the trickle down from some of the charities never reaches the patients in a meaningful way. And the financial burden on these patients, or the difficulty in getting to these specialized clinics or seeing providers, and then also the stigma that this is a terminal disease that's quickly progressive, and people pull away. And I've witnessed that as a caregiver and as a person in the field of healthcare, as a nurse and a nurse practitioner. I've been appalled at times, if I had not witnessed it myself, at the stigma associated with a diagnosis such as ALS. And there's other diagnoses out there too that I think could share in agreeing that this could become something that needs to be addressed. So back to advocacy and what we do at the ALS International Foundation, one of the missions is to change that stigma and not focus on dying, but focus on living. Focus on quality of life, focus on caring for a person. I've known many patients that don't die from ALS, they die from complications of just immobility, such as a DVT or a PE, and those are avoidable. And pneumonia. Or
pressure ulcers.
That's exactly what I would think you, yes. And see, that's just natural for us as nurses. And so I've seen that care withheld. I've seen that stigma permeate the care, both from providers and the actual hands-on caregiving, and even the funding to take care of a patient. The disparity in taking care of a patient with ALS is actually surprising as well. So I work for an agency that our patients, so we take care of veterans. When they're diagnosed with ALS, they're 100% service-connected immediately and taken care of. And I think that the VA does an excellent job in taking care of patients with ALS. And then there's others with other funding sources that their care looks radically different. So there's a huge gap in how we're caring for these patients. And we need to close the disparity in the gap.
Like insurance?
Yes.
Like insurance gaps with not taking care of them like they should.
That's right. And not providing what they need. So supplies, equipment, care. And so, and as a result, patients, and especially when my husband and I got the diagnosis, and to this day, no one has ever offered counseling and psychological care for either one of us, any sort of coping with the stages of grief or the day-to-day ups and downs that occur with receiving this kind of a diagnosis. And that can't happen. That should never happen.
How far does the you spoke about the VA. How far does the insurance go? Will they cover like things in the house? And because I know you have to have certain equipment and like power chairs, and then you get into modifying vehicles so that they can get power chairs into vehicles. So how far does the insurance go on that kind of thing?
It is so, and that's a great question. It is so wide ranging. And back to the disparity. It can be, I've known people who have very, very little funding and resources. And you see that not only their care, but their desire to continue on, to live, and their quality of life is radically affected. And then I see others that seem to be able to get lots of funding. And it was about 2 or 3 years into the diagnosis that another family with ALS said, well, that's why they call this the bankruptcy disease. And that was the first time I had ever heard of that. And I said, no, I've never heard of that. They said, oh yeah, it doesn't matter how much money you have, how much insurance you have, eventually you're going to run out of everything. And so as that time has gone on, I've witnessed the disparities that go on with this diagnosis. So back to the mission of the ALS International Foundation, one of the primary goals that we would like to put out there is education, to take away the stigma that these patients deserve care. They've just been given a scary diagnosis. And we're of the age and the generation that, and in our nursing careers, that I can remember other diagnoses being very scary to receive, that today are no longer a death sentence. They're something that people can live with. And I could name 2 or 3 of those. And I think that's our goal, is that we live with motor neuron disease. We don't talk about dying. One of the first things a provider, in providing my husband with the diagnosis, said to him, and this came from 2 providers in the field of ALS, after they gave the diagnosis, it wasn't, I know this is scary. I didn't hear any empathy, any compassion. We've got resources that you can talk to about this. It was, go home, get your affairs in order. You've got 2 or 3 years to live, and we would love it if you would consider, because there's no cure and there's no treatments, would you consider donating your body to science? That conversation should not be in the diagnosis.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon. I think it's becoming less common today because our diagnosis came over 6.5 years ago. But that is not uncommon. I've talked to many families and many patients who have been diagnosed with ALS, and they'll repeat the same. So our goal is to decrease that stigma. And the silver lining in all of this is we are seeing the needle move on neurological diseases such as Alzheimer's and ALS, and we are seeing now potential treatments come down quickly to slow and halt the progression of the disease.
Yeah, and so you're saying it needs to be more of a, let's manage this thing.
That's
kind
right.
of when you get that diagnosis, there needs to be more of a, this is the situation, let's just go tackle the situation.
That's right.
Let's just manage it and manage the disease as best as we can.
Yes.
I like that. Is there anything, I guess, more that you want to talk about before I ask the last couple of questions? Is there anything else that you want to cover about your organization, or I think you gave a good explanation of what you're trying to accomplish through your foundation. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in that regards?
No, just that we are going to be starting so this is 2025. In the middle of 2025, we are going to be starting a campaign and going into the year 2026. And we are going to be having a couple of fundraisers that hopefully we can have on an annual basis as well. But you can go to the website at alsinternational.org and you can donate. And that's where we are going to be spending the majority of our effort in creating a couple of fundraisers around the country for that, and where the money will go. So we're actually taking donations as well for equipment that we can loan or fund for other patients. And again, we just started this in 2022, so we're just getting up and running. So we're looking at trying to do a couple more fundraisers for that reason.
Okay.
Good.
And you're 501c3.
Yes.
So that's good for people to know that
Yes.
anything they give is they get the
Tax.
tax
Tax.
yeah.
Yes, the tax deduction. Yeah.
Okay. So last couple questions would be, and I know that you're probably very qualified to answer this because of all the things you see in the legal side of stuff and the healthcare side. What does the healthcare system, kind of like as we know it in America, what do they do well, and what needs improvement? What needs more attention, and what are some ways that those issues can be addressed, and how do we find solutions to those problems?
So I'll start out with the positives, what we do well. I think especially as nurses, we are the most trusted profession, and we obviously have been doing that well for many, many years. So I think to continue to hold ourselves accountable, keep the transparency going, and continue to be ever improving. And I think those are some of the tenets that separate us in our profession from a lot of other professions. So I think we do that well. And I think nurses and nurse leaders are instrumental in guiding the healthcare system. But also, I want to encourage nurses it doesn't stop when you clock in and clock out. As nurses, I think that we all can agree that we were called to our profession. We didn't just pick the profession, it picked us as well. And I'm sure we all heard as young people growing up, oh, you should be a nurse. and we were taking care of strays and and tending to cuts and whatnot. So it's a calling for us. So our I would like to encourage, and I think we do this well, is to what we're doing today and what you're doing, to be advocates on and off the clock, be advocates for our family, our neighbors, our friends, our parishioners, and also some of us, I know some that are legislatively active and very powerful at those levels, but we can be politicians. We can influence and be a part of a political action committee. We can go to the capitals. We can go to Washington. We can go to our state capitals. But we can do it on the local level as well within our community. So I think those are the positives that we do well. I see nurses doing. So I think we need to continue that. And then in terms of the healthcare system itself, some people say we're in crisis. At this point, I would definitely say that, and we all know about the nursing shortage over the years, it waxes and wanes, and I think we're definitely in a dip. But I don't think it's unique to nursing as well. I think there's been a number of issues, especially if we just talk about in the United States, that have stretched us to our capacity and what we're able to do. So we're going to have to find solutions to how to work stronger together and smarter together. So I guess to do more with less. And I think with the advent of some of the technology that's coming out, and it's just coming out continually, we need to stay abreast of that and see how we can quickly incorporate it and fast track what the evidence is showing and get it to the bedside and implement it. So, and that is, and then we also need to encourage people to go into the healthcare field. I think that's something that we should have campaigns. I would like to see ads on television or ads in different mediums that encourage people to become nurses, that we as nurses take people that we see have those skills and really mentor them. I think that is something that's desperately needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think about, you talked about encouraging people to go into healthcare. What do you think about the cost of education for healthcare providers? Because I know there's a wide range of, like if you take a look at, what I've always thought is the smartest thing to do is like become a CNA. If you want to be a nurse, become a CNA and get a job at like a hospital or something, because there are programs where they will pay you to go back to school. And to me, that's just like, if that's really what you want to do, that's a smart way to do it. I know that there's, some people go into the military and they can get the GI Bill to help pay for their schooling. And then if you want to be a physician, that's just a whole other, there's just physicians that are walking out with massive loans that they have to repay. And I don't know, there's probably some hospitals that help with relocation and things like that. But is that a barrier that can somehow be managed? I don't even know how you address that. Because you have to pay to go to school. So do you have any thoughts on that? Like how to manage the debt, just how expensive it is to become, because there's even discrepancies with nursing schools. You can go to a community college or you can go to a bigger private university that costs a lot of money.
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on that financial area?
I do. And this isn't just for nursing school or medical school or school in general, but I think my advice would be at this stage in my life to live within your means. So if you want to be an electrician, a nurse, a doctor, that takes planning. And rather than go to the most expensive school because of the reputation or the easiest school to get into, you need to take into consideration that that's something that you're going to be saddled with. That's a burden that you're going to be saddled with. And some may be able to get scholarships based on their academic merits or achievements, and other scholarships or grants. But I think to live within your means, and I loved your idea, that's why I was smiling about the CNA. I absolutely believe that anyone going into healthcare, especially nurses that are so hands-on, need to know, is this what you want to do? And I think as a CNA, and developing those technical skills in touching a patient, that empathy, that compassion, that ability to listen, that kindness, that it's very hard to, and I think we all have that in our makeup, but we also have to bring that out in those as well. And I think as a CNA, that's a perfect place to start, to decide whether or not this is for you. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're all about, is the touch, to be able to, even as an RN or as a physician, we still need to be able to delegate. And I think to have never gone through those steps and fast-tracked yourself and end up getting financially burdened, so to speak, with this debt in the future. So I think living within your means, planning a strategy if you want to be in the field, working your way up, because that's another way to fund your education. And as to what you were saying, there are opportunities to exchange work for and a future for a career if you agree to pay, if they agree to pay X amount towards your classes, that you'll stay on with that hospital. And I think I love the idea, and I hate that this has gone away, but I remember the time when you could actually become a nurse in the hospital and work on the floor in a program that the hospital instituted. I would like to see that as an option as well.
Yeah.
To come back.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered just about everything that we wanted to cover. So thank you for taking the time to talk. And I think you gave a lot of good information for, people in the healthcare system, especially to consider on the legal side of things. And, thanks for sharing your story about your ALS International Foundation. And, once again, people can go to the website. What is it again?
ALSinternational.org.
Okay, ALSinternational.org. And keep an eye out for those fundraisers. And just thanks for being on and sharing your story.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcos. And it's been a pleasure. And I do want to, as we've been talking today, when you see the synergy, like I keep referring to, I really hope that nurses walk away from this podcast and others realizing that it's not just a job, but this is something that we take with us and we use through all aspects of our lives in our calling. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.